Hello, scholars. My name is Ira McIntosh, and this is Hypothesis. Hey everyone, I'm so excited. This is the first episode of my new podcast, Hypothesis, and you are here on the ground floor of something new and something exciting, and I cannot wait to take this journey with you. The goal of this podcast is to find our way through academia, demystify the academic space, find a way to talk to these people who seem intimidating and who are experts in their chosen areas and make the world a better place by finding our way through these difficult conversations. I am proud to present this project to you. I hope it goes on for a very long time, and I'm so very honored that you're here with me. I have some incredible guests who are lined up, and I can't wait for you to hear these conversations. I, myself, an academic, am so intimidated by some of the people that I'm talking to, but you'll just have to wait and see. It's so much fun and so cool to get to see what these people are researching. For instance, this first episode, I have the distinct pleasure to talk to Dr. Taylor Cummings, who is a scholar, educator, and advocate whose work explores the intersections of belonging, motivation, and healing within society and academic institutions. She holds a PhD in educational psychology from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where her dissertation, The Miseducation of Taylor Cummings, an autoethnographic analysis of belonging in the United States education system and a vision towards healing and consciousness, used autoethnography to examine how Black women experience belonging and motivation while navigating and resisting miseducation in pursuit of self-knowledge and liberation. With an MEd in Curriculum and Instruction and a BA in Social Development and Cultural Change, Dr. Cummings brings a deeply reflective, culturally rooted lens to educational research, drawing from transpersonal psychology, African-centered ontoepistemologies, and her lived experience. She has served in diverse roles across higher education, including a course instructor, DEIJ fellow, and assessment lead in student affairs. Dr. Cummings is also the founder of The Lab, a Black women scholars peer support system, a healing-centered space designed to counter epistemic violence and foster community, reflection, and collective care. Beyond academia, Dr. Cummings is an active voice in public policy conversations around mental health, educational equity, and gun violence prevention, having been featured by CNN, the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, and the Women Ambassadors Foundation. Her work is guided by a commitment to justice, self-love, and creating spaces where all people can thrive. This episode is such a cool one for me to start with because my own research centers around ethnography and going to the source of information, people's lives, and discussing with those who have lived through certain experiences how those experiences have changed them, informed them, and memory work, and how their memories of events can inform how they exist in the world today. And Dr. Taylor Cummings and I have a conversation in this episode about autoethnography, so discussing how you look into yourself and use yourself as the source material and as the research method for finding new information. So if you're interested in reading more, uh, there will be articles that are posted on my Substack. So you can go and check out the articles because we'll be discussing those throughout the episode. You don't have to read them. We do discuss what they talk about. But if you would like to read more, those will be posted. And I just, I'm just so excited. Thank you for being here. And let's get on with the episode. Yeah, but if people hear me sipping coffee, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I've been
that
up
might
since
be
very
the
early. Yeah, that's going to be the like key of these episodes is all of us are just going to be drinking as much caffeine as possible. Because academia runs on caffeine.
it's honestly a drug and it's scary, but
It is, but it's legal, and we will take that.
illegal.
Okay. So, I mean, before just to start everything off with this episode, I just want to say that I'm very excited. I'm so happy that people are listening. I'm going to assume they're listening, even though we're pre-recording. And I'm just going to, live in my own fantasy that we're super important and everyone wants to hear us. And so welcome to the first episode of this new venture. I am so excited to bring on guests that can help to demystify academia and talk about the research and just show that academics are really, for the most part, there are really stuffy old white guys. But for the most part, we're like just really super nerdy people who like a very specific thing and can't stop sitting in a library talking about it. Um, so I'm very excited to bring this to a new audience that maybe doesn't have a connection to academia. Um, but yeah, uh, so in that vein, could you talk to me and tell me what brought you to a PhD? Like that's a lot of work. So
Yes.
much work.
And I had no intentions on this at all. So,
That's
and
how it happens.
yes, and that's also what my work is about, how we find ourselves in certain life experiences, certain circumstances, and maybe at that time you may not understand why you're there or how you got there, but as you start to reflect and look back on your life, you're like, it all makes sense, you know? So as a very young
Mhm.
girl, I just had a lot of questions about the world, about myself, and just trying to understand why is the world the way that it is. I grew up in the church, I grew up in private Christian school. I just grew up very inquisitive. And I feel as I went on and on and on, I didn't really have a concrete idea of what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to help people. I had a heart for helping. I had a heart for making the world a better place. And I just kind of stayed in school long enough to kind of beat the game. But it also was a matter of like, okay, I knew if to be successful in this world, to be, a great person in this world, you kind of have to be really, really good at something. And so I set out to kind of just say, okay, I'm going to be an expert. And then I started to realize, oh, I can be an expert on myself. I can be an expert on the things that I really care about. And I found the PhD, I found educational psychology, and it kind of was just an evolving step that just took shape on its own after me just kind of questioning, okay, what's my next step after finishing undergrad, after working in the school system for a little bit. I was like, okay, what's next? What do I want to do? And then I literally just did a search of education and psychology into Google because I was like, these are two things I really like. So let's see what pops up. And then
And Google is like, have I got the plan for you?
yeah, and there was a researcher, a black male researcher who was talking about belonging and being black and navigating academia and school and just your place in the world. And I was like, oh wow, like you could do this for a living. I didn't really understand what research was or what researchers were. And so that's just kind of how it came, me just questioning, life, questioning really my place in life. And I found out what a PhD was.
Well, and you also have some very specific other degrees. Like your bachelor's and your master's are very like I don't think I and I don't think I know. I had no clue what even sociology was as an undergrad. So
Yes.
like I can't imagine going to college and just being like, yeah, I want to study social development. That makes a
Yeah.
whole lot
And
of
I
sense to
did.
me.
I did not say that. So I actually started off I started off as a student athlete. So coming out of high school, I actually had a
Mm.
full ride Division 1 to play soccer. And then towards really actually the very beginning of my student athlete journey at the university, I got injured. It was an undiagnosed injury. We were
Mm.
very uncertain about what it was. My work ethic was questioned. The very nature of the injury was questioned. And that was kind of my first struggle with belonging and not really having a place, being the only Black girl on the soccer team and just being looked at as like, why are you here? Type of thing. And so that didn't end up faring off too well. So I ended up going to a community college after losing my scholarship just because I had to regroup. I had to regroup my identity, my emotions, my feelings, my grades. My grades were not good after that
Yeah.
first chaotic year. And so just having to just restructure and reorganize myself. And then I ended up going to community college, still not really certain what I wanted to be or what I wanted to
Yeah.
do, but just sort of having this idea that college is sort of just what you do. You know, my family
Mm.
did go to college. I'm grateful for that. I had two parents who, were educated in higher ed. And so that was just kind of what you do. You go to college and you'll figure it out. So I went to college, and then it wasn't until I transferred to the HBCU I was just looking at programs. I knew I was interested in humanities. I was interested in people. I've had college professors say, "You're an anthropologist." I don't know what an anthropologist is. I just know I care
Mm.
about culture and people, and that's interesting to me. So I don't know. I don't even know how I selected it. I just know I was in a liberal studies program. And this is some of those like synchronicities things where it's like I
Yeah.
don't know when I chose that degree, but looking back at my life, it only makes sense that I chose that degree. So it was social
Mm.
development and cultural change was my bachelor's degree in a liberal studies program at an HBCU in North Carolina. And that program, that degree changed my entire life. It helped to just reconform my brain around just whiteness, white supremacy, just growing up socialized a certain way. It really confirmed a lot of untruths or truths that I just hadn't really been able to confirm, or just those inklings of questions that you have about why is the
Yeah.
world so messed up. The
Yeah.
HBCU gave me a whole new perspective to be able to ground myself in, and I was very grateful for that. Still didn't really know what I wanted to do with that degree. And so I worked in the school system for a while. My background has always been in education. And then I realized, okay, I can't really do too much in this space that I'm in. So let's try grad school. So then I found, like I said, I found the man who was a scholar, called him up on the phone, or actually I sent an email. He really loved what I was talking about, what we were doing. So we hopped on a phone call and he's like, "Do you want to apply here? Like you should apply here." So I got to do really cool work around Black students belonging K through 12, just designing social justice curriculums for school districts and things like that. And then I said, okay, I guess I'll get a PhD. I've been doing research. I've been in school. What's 4 more years, to be able
Right.
to be a doctor, to be an expert. So it just kind of made sense after being on the journey. So
I mean, that's an incredible journey. And yeah, the synchronicities are crazy because thinking back on my academic career, I'm not in a PhD program yet, still waiting on that. Hopefully by the time this is posted. By the time this is posted, I will know whether or not I got in. I better. It'll if I don't, I might actually need to be committed. Um but over my 3 degrees, I've looked back and realized, oh, this thing led to this thing, and then this thing led to this thing. And for me, it was I ended up taking off 10 years between my first master's degree. That was kind of like an oops. I didn't mean to do that, but I was told I should and given an opportunity, so I ran with it. Um, and I took 10 years just to live and experience things and figure out what life was about. And through that realized that I was really interested in history and really interested in advocacy and really interested in helping people figure out where they came from. um,
yeah,
and because of that, I was able to find a program that focused on communication, and then found an advisor that helped me really kind of push that wide degree into something very narrow and very specific that got to the heart of that. But it took me 10 years of living between Seattle and New York and being a drag queen and working in bars and gyms and all of these things, like it takes a long time for some of us.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. It took me, like I said, 6 years to do my undergraduate degree. I didn't take too much time away from school in particular, but it is like you're finding yourself. You have to live
Yeah.
life. Your experiences are what informs you, the questions you ask, what you care about, what interests you, and what really just guides your passion. And so that's something that's always just been very important to me is like, why are we here? What is our purpose
Mm.
on this earth? And people weren't able to answer that for me, not in church, not in school. And it just kind of evolved where now I'm the person who gets to ask those questions and I can find some answers for myself. And maybe I can help other people find answers for themselves too.
Yeah. So one thing that really excites me about your research and gets me and drags me in right away is your focus on autoethnography as a research method. And it is kind of such a it's a controversial method in academic circles. um how did you find autoethnography and what does that mean to you? Like where did that lead you?
Yeah, so I do like to say that autoethnography found me. I do feel like it is like this process of discovery with research just in general. Um, but I really was just on maybe I was reading something about complex systems. So that's how I found the
Mm.
PhD program, the Hilpert and Marchand article on complex systems approaches to educational psychology. I found this article in my master's program and my eyes just got so big. I was just like, oh my God, they're talking my language. These linear statistical like I just was so grateful because like I've just been trying to get out of like quant. Because I'm like these like they said the linear statistical models do not account for the complex phenomena that humans engage or experience. So how do we account for all the interconnectedness, all the spontaneous things that occur that we just can't account for?
Mm.
We don't know that that's going to happen. We don't know when it happened, how it happened, all the things that are happening simultaneously. How do you make sense of all of that? And so I guess somewhere along my qualitative exploration, and I care about the self and consciousness. So maybe there was some searching I was
Mm.
doing, but I literally couldn't tell you. I think maybe I found an article about autoethnography as a complex systems approach. And then I just kept digging into autoethnography. And then I found Blackgirl Autoethnography as a method. And as soon as I read that article, I was just crying. I was just like in tears. And that's what I will say. Autoethnography for me has been a lot of crying. But
Yeah.
it's about, and I just think that's what resonance is, when you find something that
Mm.
you that speaks to you, that gives you language to something that you've been experiencing but haven't been able to really vocalize or give language to, it's like, oh, you see me, and it's a piece of paper.
Right.
And that's what alchemical hermeneutics is, and that's what I deal with in terms of like how we interpret things and how things find you, you find it transforms you, you're transformed by it, and all these types of things. And so understanding those moments of resonance. Why did I cry when I found this piece of paper? Why did I cry when
Mm.
I read these words or listened to these lyrics? And
Yeah.
so really was just the algorithm. The algorithm brought it to me, I'd say. Just looking, seeking, what you seek is seeking you. And I really do believe that and I live by that. And so I couldn't tell you how I found autoethnography, and that's why I say it found me. But once I found it, I knew it was for me because I was always about knowledge of self. I was like, knowledge of self is the name of the game. That's what this is. That's what the Greeks were saying. And the Greeks got that from the ancient Comedics. And so, really understanding what this is about, I found a method that I could be me, do me, and make sense of my life experiences because I got into this work because of my life experiences and being able to validate and say, no, our lives are data. We are the data.
Yeah.
And you're trying to take me and you're trying to contort me, you're trying to control, literally control groups, you're trying to do all these things to me, a human being, and trying to extract my knowledge, extract my information. And so, how can I do research that's not exploitative? And it also allowed me not to have to go into certain communities and take as a researcher. I
Yeah.
just focus with me. Start with me. If I want
Yeah.
to change the world, I got to start with me. So once autoethnography found me, I was like, oh, I can do research on myself. This is what I'm proposing. And that's honestly how I got into the PhD program itself. Because once I met the authors of that first original paper that I was like obsessed with, I was like, I want to do autoethnography. I see it as a complex systems approach to research. Da 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 da. This is what, and they were like, oh yeah, like we need this. Like you're like doing your own thing, like, but we need this. And so they said apply, and I got in, and that's how it happened.
I mean, it's something that really struck me when I was reading the articles that you sent. And those will be posted online so other people can read them as well. Because I'm all about transparency in academia and making sure that people have access to information. Um, but something that really struck me, even between articles that were, one of them was very scientific and very like, here we're going to break it down and use these terms that you better figure out. And then another was very conversational and just kind of read through her life, and she was explaining herself and etc. And but the through theme that I really got from them was this emphasis on life being intersectional, and everything that makes us up is important all at the same time. It's not these little tiny components that can all be left and figured out individually. But then, as kind of an umbrella term, thinking about just context and how context is always important. And that really struck me because one of the big kind of things that people have issues with ethnography is what you just said, that exploitative nature of it, that you're taking things from people without giving them anything in return. And I mean, that goes back to the very beginnings of anthropology and sociology, and white women going to Caribbean nations and telling them this is how you're living instead of letting people tell their own stories. Um, and so it really struck me that these articles were really digging into that idea of context and making sure that we're constantly remembering, like in Boylarn's article, that she very specifically put together the words black girl instead of black space girl, putting them together to remind her readers that she is both at the same time, and you can't talk about one without the other. It was a very moving article. I absolutely see why you cried. There were moments where I was just like, ooh, oh, and like taking copious quotes and comments from
Like my first time with that article, and really even now, I barely get past the first two pages. Like just her talking about journeying to home, and the home I was journeying to was not a physical place. It was something within me, and just really understanding what that meant from a soul perspective. So I deal with
it.
psychology, but I'm all about the soul and consciousness. And the other article from Romanishan, I think his name is, I never heard it said out loud. I've only read it, but
That's how it is.
it comes from a book. His book is called The Wounded Researcher, one of my favorite books. But that article is like a snippet of the book and talks about bringing the unconscious into our research process. And I think it relates to autoethnography because it's about bringing your full self, your whole self. And a lot of times with academia, they tell you to be objective, keep yourself
Mm,
out, stay out of it. But what really is
yeah.
an objective perspective? Is there such thing, you know? And so really understanding the complex dichotomy between objectivity and subjectivity, what's been done to this concept of subjectivity, why we privilege objectivity, and just what it has to do with control and domination and power and things of that nature. But understanding what it means to really break through those traditions or those practices or customs that we have in academia, and just understanding how doing that and being that way doesn't allow us to get the richness and the fullness of our experience, which really we're supposed to be doing research to help solve world problems. And I think
Yeah.
that's what PhD folks or research folks get really a bad rep for, is we don't
Yeah.
solve problems. We just like to talk about things. And so for me, it was like involving myself requires me to like be solution oriented.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's, as I'm embarking on this journey, is that, and as I'm talking to more academics, that is something that keeps kind of sitting in the background, is this kind of frustration with the fact that academia is so closed off, but the people within it are so desperate to put education out there. Like it's almost as if the not almost as if it is that the systems that have been created by those before us have set up a wall so people can't get information. It's very much like a dark ages
Yeah.
form of like building that wall in front of what's actually going on in the church so you can't see the customs and the traditions and all of these things. And that brings me to this idea that multiple articles brought up, that that this kind of research, that ethnography is radical, and that everyday life is political. And I loved that idea that stepping outside of these traditional customs and forms of research is a radical act right now, because the systems are so set in their ways.
Yeah, well, research has been a key figure in laying the foundation for all of our isms. I actually just did a
Mhm.
presentation about healing from the isms and how we've been inundated with all these things and identities and labels, and how do we really free ourselves? Because with race comes racism, and that causes issues. And so to really free ourselves from that, we have to really understand what these systems and systems of categorizations or all these types of things were, right? And researchers, the intellects or the scholars of society were really the ones to say, this is what it is, this is how society is. And we took that and we accepted that as truth. And so now our society is living off the words of age-old philosophers. I'm like, there's never been any more philosophers ever since Plato and Socrates. So I'm like, can we, and so understanding, yes, education is inherently political. Doing things not as they've been done when you know it's been harmful to us is an act of radicalism. I do believe that. And for me, I've always had this tension of being in academia because I study the process of miseducation and the process of indoctrination. So why would you then purposefully put yourself in this system while you're trying to speak out against it or revolutionize it, X, Y, and Z? So I've had to battle that a lot personally, and even sometimes have to defend my choice, to other people or and valid critics. I don't have a problem
Yeah.
answering any questions or asking any questions. Well, why are you in the system if you say da 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 da? But I'm not an elitist, so I don't think the PhD, I mean, it means a lot of things, but I don't think it means that you're necessarily smarter than anyone or better than anyone. It was a space where I felt I could ask the questions I wanted to ask. I can do the things I wanted to do, and it was what was best for me. I wouldn't necessarily it's best for everyone, but for me, it was the best choice.
Something you just said reminded me of the Boy Lauren article, and when she said that she had to find a way to see herself as worthy of recognition in addition to critique.
Mm.
And I loved that concept of critique being important, and understanding that you need that feedback in order to continually form how you speak and bring knowledge to people, but also understanding that the critique doesn't give you worth, and that other people's ideas of who you are isn't what gives you worth. Your own self and your own knowledge is what gives you worth.
Yes, that was a major finding of my dissertation. Is not having to depend on external validation, especially when it comes to belonging. The way that we conceptualize our place in the world, where do you fit in, where do you not fit in, has a lot to do with other people's perceptions of you, whether people accepted you, respected you, supported you, or included you. And what happens when you don't have those things is when it gets very dark for a lot of people. So I was
Yeah.
always interested in questioning that. Well, why does belonging have to do with other people accepting me or respecting me? Because if that doesn't happen, then does that mean I don't belong here? And what does it mean for me to want to belong to a space where I'm not accepted, respected, supported, or included? What does it mean for me to want to belong to a space that has historically excluded me and people like me, especially school? We're talking about little Ruby Bridges, literally not allowed to go to certain schools,
Yeah.
and then forcefully integrated. And so, was that the best thing for her? I don't know. She's still alive, so I'd love to ask her someday. But
Love to ask her.
no, for sure. I would love to have a conversation about belonging with Miss Ruby Bridges. I think that'd be really powerful. Just thinking about why we did what we did, or why the state really did what they did, and the impacts that it had on her psychologically, socially, emotionally, spiritually, all those
Yeah.
types of things. When we're putting young Black children in very volatile environments, what does that really
Yeah.
do? And did it really serve the purpose that we feel it should have served? If we're
Yeah.
looking now, 2025, what is the state of education for historically
Mhm.
marginalized people, So
Yeah. I mean, that makes me think of, as a child of the 90s, affirmative action was a huge thing in the United States in the 90s. I remember that was one of the this is going to sound bad for a second, but I promise there's a good ending to it. That was one of the driving factors behind why my parents started homeschooling me and my sister, was because my sister is 3 years older than me, and they wanted to put her in preschool, but because of like needing to have specific numbers and specific percentages, the city of Seattle wanted to send my sister, who is a white kid, she's Jewish, but she was a white kid, across town
Okay.
to a different school as a 5 year old. And my mom was like, I'm not comfortable with her being on a bus for an hour every morning as a 5 year old. So no, no, no.
No.
But I mean the the good intentions behind systems like that, that then, like you said, can put people in volatile situations and put people in situations that they're not necessarily prepared for, on both sides, both the teachers and the students.
Yeah.
um yeah, I it's not something that I've studied a lot, but I'd love to see interviews with those kids and see what good that did.
And the people outside yelling, like, and
Yeah.
being people in the room, like,
Literally.
I would really like it'd be really interesting, like, just as a researcher who studies belonging and, safe spaces and things like that, I think it'd be really interesting to see the
Oh
long-lasting
yeah.
effect of integration or desegregation, they say.
Yeah. Well, and they're every once in a while on the liberal side of like Twitter or X, whatever, um, the images of the people yelling at the Little Rock Five. Am I saying the correct one?
9, 9. Well, we were talking
Woof.
about
I
but
just
yeah, we can
yes,
also
yeah,
talk about Little Rock
yes.
too.
But the images of the white people screaming at them, at these children as they're walking to a school, and the commentary is always, just remember, these are people's parents and grandparents, who are, all of them are still alive. And part of me wants to sit down with those people and be like, where are you now?
I
I
don't
just
know,
need to
yeah.
know. I like, wherever you ended up, I just need to know what your thinking is now, because a lot has happened, and I just need the hope that you saw the difference.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's gonna be interesting to see where our society ends up.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly. Um
Yeah.
so okay, so pulling it back into methods of research. One of my questions for you, as someone who studies ways to get outside of these norms and get outside of these boxes, what are some ideas that you have come across, and what are some ways that researchers can start incorporating new forms of research into their work, especially for myself, making it personal as I'm about to embark on yet another degree, hopefully. What can I use? What are my tools?
Okay, yeah. No, I love participatory approaches to research. I think, like you mentioned, not going into communities and trying to tell their story, but allowing whoever it is that you're talking to or you're exploring or trying to understand more about, allowing them to very clearly express who they are, what they know, and how they know it. I think that's always just a prime thing to do when you go into an environment. So participatory action approaches, things of that nature, but things that are communally based. I've taken like some participatory based research, communal things like in the public health space, and that was very interesting taking a course over there. But my background has always been very participatory in that way. I'd also, like I said, recommending the alchemical hermeneutics approach from the book of the Wounded Researcher. He talks about using this in alongside any sort of traditional research method, but it is about understanding your subjectivity, understanding your unconscious and what's coming up for you in your research journey. So it's just really jotting down just any sort of emotional bodily reactions, things that are occurring as you are going through this process, what questions are coming up, who you're in conversation with. He talks about transference dialogues, and it's a lot about what's sort of happening in this unseen space of your consciousness. So as I'm maybe asking questions about what might help, let's say diabetes, right? If you're a public health researcher, you're trying to understand something like that. What's coming up for you? Maybe you had a grandmother or great grandmother, or maybe you knew someone, or but what is coming up for you as you're doing this and being able to unpack that so we're not projecting ourselves or trying to just keep ourselves out of the work, but being able to process the healing nature of who and what we are and why we do what we do. So I always recommend that for sure. I also like arts-based approaches to research. I think that's always something really phenomenal you can do. There's photo voice as a method. There's so many different things that you can do that includes other ways of expression, other ways of collecting data that can provide some really rich details and nuance to the human experience. So I would definitely take a look
Mm.
at art-based approaches to research for sure, participatory based methods of research. Anything ethnographic, I think, too, is super cool. But mixing your methods, I think, can be really cool. You don't have to just choose one method, even if you're quant heavy. You can mix and mingle. And with a dissertation or with a project, you may not want to give yourself too much to do. But you can get creative, you know? So I just think
Yeah.
about creativity because at the end of the day, you're trying to understand someone's experience, you're trying to understand their problem,
Mhm.
and you're trying to. So the best way to do that is to understand the context in which you're exploring and then figuring out what makes the most sense for that. I think a big thing too is not going in with a predetermined set of this is how I'm going to conduct this research because once you get in the field, you really don't know, right? You have a research plan, you have a research design, but things can change. So I think also being open to that fluidity and being open to what that environment is giving you too is really, really helpful. But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to what you're inquiring about. So what is the question itself? Like, what do you want to know? And then how do you feel is the best way to go about answering that question? And there's so many different ways of doing that. But I would say just keep it communal, keep it community oriented, keep it ethical.
Yeah.
Um, and just be a responsible researcher. But I think the more you allow your participants to express themselves freely, they're going to trust you. You'll begin to trust them. And I just think it's going to be a really, fruitful project no matter what you decide or what sort of lane you take. But don't be afraid of mixing methods and don't be afraid of being creative, is what I would say.
Yeah. One thing that I had to learn on the ground as I finished my thesis or as I wrote my thesis was that concept of fluidity and being willing to let my topic shift as I
Yeah.
went. Because my thesis is very ethnographically based.
Mm,
I went in with a hypothesis, but there's only so much you can push people to give information, but then also as a researcher you don't want to feed them answers and you don't want to force data into a specific topic. So I came in with an idea of what I wanted to research, and then over time it shifted to something that was relatively similar, but it wasn't the same topic at all. And that kind of freaked me out for a second. And then I kind of sat back and was like, wait, practically speaking, this just gave me like 3 pages of my thesis that I don't even have to think about. I can just write, hey, this is where I started and this is where I ended up.
And those can
But
also be findings. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
no,
you.
go for it.
I think those can also be findings too. I think a lot of people did
Yeah.
get discouraged that like, oh, I didn't get what I thought I was gonna get, but that's really cool, And so
And
being
it's
able,
important. It's
yeah,
important for researchers to be open to change and to be open to the fact that their ideas of what they're going to be studying are not necessarily going to be what they find. Like I thought I was going to find very specific information about social media use and how millennials interacted with people. And then I found that millennials didn't really interact with people. And I was like, oh no, where do I go? But then my advisor was very helpful and was like, that's your finding.
yeah,
You found something. Now write like
yeah.
that's where you can go now. So yeah, fluidity is such an important aspect to research, especially this kind of research. Like if you're sitting down and writing an article or research paper and it's just the kind of literature review, I'm just talking about what's written, there's
Yeah.
as much fluidity that's going to be necessary there because you can go from point A to point B very easily. But
Mhm.
talking to people will take you in directions you never thought you would go.
Yes. And from an autoethnographic standpoint, talking to yourself. So it's too, because even there were tensions in terms of like my dissertation where I had
Mm.
couple committee members saying, well, like, where are your research questions? And then my committee chair is like, she doesn't need them. She doesn't need like she like, and he was honestly like, I would rather her not have any research questions because
Mm,
it's an autoethnography. She's gonna see what she finds, you know? And so it was more so about the objective and the fact that I was understanding belonging and motivation through a lens of a Black woman, where it's
mm,
historically been conceptualized through white males, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like I was completely critiquing those models of motivation and human behavior and what it means to belong. So it was cool where it was like, oh, they're really letting me do what I want to do. Like, and really almost like pushing me in ways where I was like, I came in like, I'm radical, da da da. But the process of going through education or miseducation, it does kind of take a little bit of that out of you. And I started to realize, like, am I getting de-radicalized through this process? And then like I got to get back to myself, you know, because there's certain
mm,
things you want to talk about, you get some pushback, or people are like, well, how is that practical? How does that help us? Or what does that mean? Or Taylor, literally, you're up here and we need you to land the plane for us. So a lot of that stuff of just really feeling misunderstood a lot of the times, but then getting to the point of the dissertation writing where it's like, oh no, this is my shot and this is my chance to do what I want to do. And even when I find myself being kind of like scared, or sometimes we wait for permission, like because we've been used to asking for permission or needing permission to do certain things, or because if you do this and it's not right, you're not going to get the grade, or you're not going to get, you know, this requirement box checked off. And so now it's like, oh, I don't have to ask for permission, like I'm the researcher and I make the choices. And they're like, Taylor, be you, do you. It doesn't even have to be an academic talk. And I'm like, but I'm so used to talking like this and I'm like trained in this way. So the
mm.
process of like really freeing yourself, even though you
Yeah.
have it conceptually as a thought of like, okay, this is what I'm doing, like really practicing those things in your daily is a skill, and it's another level of knowledge of self. It's another level of like being yourself that I think people often forget. There's a gap between knowing and doing. It's like I can know all
Yeah.
the things, but when it's time to do it and execute, that's a different level of having just like learned and knowing and having the reflective knowledge about who and what I am. Now I got to be what I am. And that can be a birthing process in and of itself. So,
So, okay, quick, quick total backup. And maybe I should have brought up this question earlier, but whatever. We're on a journey together.
yeah.
Um, this may also be a very stupid question, but I think it bears asking since we have an audience listening to us, what is the difference between autoethnography and autobiography? Like is there a difference? Are there intersections? Like what is that? Why is there
So,
a
yeah.
different word?
Well, I guess because autobiography, I've never necessarily understood like as a research method itself. I think
Mm,
autobiographical work is more of like, you know, someone writing about their life story, period, right? And I think they are like autoethnography is autobiographical in nature, but I'd say that it came from the anthropological field in terms of ethnography, like going
got it.
into a group, growing into a community, going into an environment and embedding yourself in it, learning, knowing, being that insider, outsider participant type of thing, and and getting insights about that. I think autobiography is more so the documentation of that kind of life history. It's more along the lines of life history and that sort of discipline. But I'd say autoethnography really comes from that ethnographic research piece and then saying, you know what? I am the self and I can do ethnographic research with self because I am always with self. You know, so I think
Yeah.
it's just sort of where they were born out of. So I like that you asked that question because it is kind of like, well, what is the difference, right? But I don't think all autobiographies are autoethnographies, and I would definitely say not all autoethnographies are autobiographies, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
So,
yeah, I think that took me a little while to kind of figure out in my studies because I came into a communications degree from years of music and all of a sudden people were using words like semiotics and ethnography and all of these methods and like uh the hypodermic needle and all of these things and I'm just like what are you talking about? Can we back up and explain these things? This is a 101 class. Can we please, what's going on? So I think it's worth talking about those things because they're not necessarily words that non-researchers use.
Uh,
Um, and they
yeah.
are, I've started keeping a journal because of being in this degree and being like, oh, I need to get more in touch with, not in touch with my feelings, but yes, in touch with my feelings. Like in touch with how am I sitting? Like what does this mean to this moment? How are these things that I'm taking in affecting how I'm putting out? Like what, how is my environment informing my actions?
Yeah, and I'd also
Um
say a big difference too lies just in the word itself, right? You have ethno, and that's the culture piece, right? And so when you're
mhm,
doing autoethnography, yes, it's autobiographical in terms of you might be looking at your life achievements, you might be looking at some failures, some struggles, and things like that. But then that culture piece is where you're taking your life and you're tying it to like larger socio-historical context or political context about this is how and why this connects to X, Y, and Z. So for me, I was studying belonging and motivation from an autoethnographic approach. And I was tying it to what this meant for self-determination as a Black woman in society, how this connected to the process of miseducation in our society. So you're talking about like a larger cultural context in which you exist as the autoethnographer, if that makes sense. And an autobiography is typically just, this is
yeah.
my life story. And of course, it's connecting to, the political landscape and things like that. Not to say that autobiographies can't be autoethnographic, but I would say that's like the main difference.
Yeah, I think at its very basic level, autobiographies are meant to be literature and they're meant to be a story that's being told versus an ethnography. Autoethnography is a research method. It's a methodology.
Yeah, exactly.
So therefore your biography can be
Yes.
a methodology for figuring yourself out, but in
Yeah.
general, they tend to just be let me
Yeah.
relate some stories over my life. Let me remember things.
But you could
Um
like you could do an autobiography as your autoethnography. It could be the thing that like you could write an autobiography and then use that, like analyze your autobiography and do an
Oh my
autoethnography.
god. Oh my god. Write two full dissertations. Let's
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
That actually brings up my last question for you, which is how aware do you think researchers should be of their own influence on their work?
A million trillion bajillion. Don't even know the number. Like that's what alchemical hermeneutics is about. I also used a paper. It was I can't remember the full title, but it had to do with an epistemology of the heart, right? I used intuitive inquiry in my dissertation because I feel who you are inherently is going to inform how you see the world, how you ask questions, how you answer questions. And I think self-awareness is key for everyone. If I could just teach about self-awareness, I would just do that because I think that's the basics of when you're understanding ontology, epistemology, axiology, all these philosophical foundations of research that just kind of get brushed off because people, oh, I don't really
Mm,
understand that. Well, I don't really know what that is. You need to. Okay. It is
mm,
really the science of being, it's the science of knowing, it's your value system. These are the things that are guiding the research process. So I think we have to be so aware from the inside out because you have to understand who and what you are, what space you take up in the world, and how, like you said, you're sharing and experiencing that with other people. But yes, that's going to impact the things that you inquire about. It's going to impact the methods you choose, the questions you ask. It's going to impact how you share and disseminate your knowledge and information. I think that's a big thing now that I'm working on after completing this program and having a dissertation. Now, how do I make this publicly accessible? How do I share it in a way that's meaningful and authentic to who and what I am because I don't want it to just be locked up in the ProQuest library somewhere, where people are just barely reading it. So
yeah.
I am trying to figure out like that accessibility piece, how to really like be a like this is for the people, this isn't
Yeah.
for it's for academia to say, hey, this is where you messed up, this is where we're harming people, but they know that, and this has been an intentional thing. So I am at least trying to bridge those gaps in a lot of different ways. So I do think knowledge of self, awareness of self is key for everyone. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say maybe especially as researchers because you are contributing to influencing public opinion. And I think that we have to understand how important that is. People believe and respect what you say because you have certain letters letters behind your name, or you've put in X amount of work to learn about something. And so we have to be very responsible and intentional about how we're sharing knowledge, how we're sharing information, the context in which we share that information. And I also, when I give book recommendations, I'm not giving book recommendations because, oh, this is the end all be all. It's a jumping point. It's a
Yeah.
starting point. I want you to read that and be like, damn, maybe I didn't think about that. Or maybe this is going to let me go think about something else in a different way. But it's not like, oh, this is Bible, because the Bible ain't even Bible, you know? So
Yeah.
I'm all
Yeah.
about critiquing. Question everything, question yourself is very important,
Mm.
but not over, right? You don't want to have self-doubt, but it is
Yeah.
a matter of like understanding who you are, what you are, and why you do what you do. I think is very important. I'm a motivation researcher, so I'm all about the why.
Yeah.
Why? Like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? What is this about? Um, and you should know that about yourself. I don't think you can really know anything until you really know yourself. You meet people as deeply as you've met yourself. You know things as deeply as you know yourself. So, and once you know yourself, you know the answer to the universe, they say, you know the gods. So
Yeah.
I think you must understand who and what you are from the inside out and at the deepest levels, you know, at the deepest levels as you can. Really understanding who you are beyond your race, your gender, your sex, your class, all these sorts of things that have gotten in the way of us just being human beings. Or if you don't think you're a human being and you something extraterrestrial, live in that and know that. But I think it's
Hmm.
really important for us to get in tune with who we are so that we can be our most healthiest, authentic selves, because I think that's important for humanity.
Absolutely. And I think something on top of all of that uh that I've had to grapple with in my life, because we know ourselves, we know our journeys, we know our stories, we know where we come from, but understanding that the people we're talking to don't always know that. Um, and so like unless I walk around with a sign on my chest saying this is who I am, these are my qualifications, people aren't going to know that. So coming to conversations humbly and saying I I know I can be perceived in a specific way, so therefore I need to speak from a place that understands that there are cultural and societal expectations placed on me because of what people see in front of them or what people are reading in front of
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And like you said,
them.
being humble, giving others grace because you don't know what other anyone else has been through. We judge so much in society.
We do.
So just releasing that, I think, is key. And I think once you start to have that grace with yourself, that's how you start to be able to show it to others. Once you stop getting being your biggest self-critic, once you stop judging yourself so harshly, you're gonna stop doing it to others because you know how it feels and you know it's not healthy. So I think that's why working with the self is so important. And I think that's why autoethnography was so just inspiring to me. Like, oh, this is what it was like a no-brainer. The moment it found me, I said, oh, this is what I'm doing. Like, this is the only method that makes sense to me. And of course, I'll do other methods. I'm into sister circles and I'm into still a lot of restorative based, healing based methodologies in terms of like our ontologies and epistemologies and just dealing with epistemicide and epistemic violence and things like that, and just how to heal from that. So definitely healing based is where I'm at in terms of the methods that we choose. But yeah.
Amazing. Well, all of that being said, would you like to answer a couple audience questions with me?
Okay, yeah.
Amazing. It's let's let in the audience. I have to come up with some kind of snappy thing to call them. Let's get some questions from the peanut gallery, shall we? Okay, so our first question comes from at Michelle from Cal on Instagram. And she asks, how do you feel about preconceived notions when people read your name and assume you are a man? How do you deal with situations where someone hasn't looked you up ahead of time and is visibly shocked or says something about the fact that you aren't a man? And this is specifically for you. I did prep my audience by saying who I was going to be recording with.
Cool. I don't know that I've gotten man, but I do get surprised that I'm not a white woman, I think sometimes,
Mm.
because my name is just Taylor Cummings. Like it's just very, we don't know what that is. And I've had times where, especially when I was a little younger, I applied as I don't even know if I applied. I think I knew someone and I got pretty much a gig to work at a courthouse. You know, like I thought
Mm.
I wanted to go to law school, so I'm doing some circuit court type work in the summer and I show up and they're like, huh? Like, are you Taylor? I'm like, yes, I'm Taylor. So some of those things, but I think maybe I'll get that a little bit more with the PhD in terms of like,
Mm.
you don't really know who this person is, and you might assume that they're a doctor, X, Y, and Z. Um, but preconceived notions don't typically bother me too much. I like being unexpected. I like even now, like someone's like, "Oh, you're a doctor," or "Oh, you have a PhD." Like I'm always getting that. So dealing with it is just being firm and knowing who you are, and just knowing that people come with who and what they are, and that's always what it's gonna be.
Amazing. And then we have one more question. And I might need to do some fancy editing on this because I'm not sure if my microphone will pick this up. But we have a listener question that was submitted to us on SpeakPipe.
Hello, Hypothesis Podcast. I'm excited to send in a question. Hello, Dr. Cummings and Ira. Congratulations on graduating. As a fellow academic, I think we all know what burnout feels like. And I guess I would love to know now that you are post academia, Ira, and Dr. Cummings, as someone who works in academia, what do you do to refill your cup? What do you do for fun to make sure that you have the energy to continue giving to the communities that you serve?
Ooh, were you able to hear that?
Yes, yeah. And I love
Okay.
that question because burnout is such a hot topic right now. One, I would say find work that doesn't burn you out. Like that's my thing. And I'm
Mm.
not doing it, and it's not that you can or you won't, not that you don't get tired, but that feeling of like I'm so drained, like I've given so much to X, Y, and Z. So finding work that's really fulfilling, because when they say you enjoy the work you do, you won't work a day in your life. So I think that really is first step, is just trying to find things that sustain you and that fulfill you and that fill your cup inherently. Not that you're not going to get tired, not that you're not going to have those days of restoration, but those days of restoration, it's not going to be like you're at zero and you're trying to get back to 100. So I think that's really helpful in just sustainability in general, is not doing work that's overworking you or depleting your energy. But also, if you do find yourself in situations like that, because we all have, I think it's also a matter of, I'm a big person on meditation, yoga, honestly, just getting outside and just letting the sun and the air cleanse you, refresh you. That's really important. Talking to people who understand you, love you, see you, know you, I think is always helpful. And, ensuring we're not necessarily trauma dumping, but sometimes we need to do that too. A good vent session is always helpful. But writing, journaling is really helpful for me. But if you find yourself feeling burnt out, I think it's just connecting with the things that honor you, and see you and make you feel good and help restore your soul. So those are some of the things that are really helpful for me. But really sometimes it's just I just need to go lay in the grass. Like
Yeah.
I need to go to the park and just lay in the grass. But I like
Oh
watching
yeah.
pictures, and I'm really spiritual and things like that. So healing, cleansing your aura, cleansing your space, a bath. I'm never gonna
Mm.
turn on a bath or shower, brushing your teeth, washing your face. Just getting up and just refreshing yourself can help. But finding things that fill you up is going to be important. And I think finding work that doesn't make you always feel that way is probably even more important.
Absolutely. I would say I'm I'm not a good person at avoiding burnout. I I kind of live my life in burnout mode, but I'm learning and I'm getting better.
Yeah.
My first tip is um work on time management. Work on figuring out, okay, I have this kind of thing that I need to do. How can I break it down into smaller pieces so that it doesn't feel as heavy
Mhm.
and as life altering, um, to keep yourself from burning out. But once the burnout happens, I'm a very tactile person. I have to do things with my hands. I always have been. As a little kid, my dad used to read books to us every night, and I would sit there and just draw. So just sketching, or I've taken up knitting again just to have something where I feel like I'm actually doing something and can see the results of it quickly. But yeah, also just taking some time and sitting in the park and just feeling fresh air and feeling sunshine on your skin is always
It's like
helpful.
it's like the basic thing. It's like sometimes we feel like we got to do this and do it's like you're tired, remember? Just
Yeah.
rest. Like sometimes it's literally just shutting your mind off. And I would say like healing frequency sounds helps too.
Mm.
you're sick, if you have a headache, if you're not feeling good. But it is finding those things that work for you, painting, whatever it is, but I think like you said, like not seeing things as such a huge task or such a huge problem will definitely help to alleviate some of that anxiety, the frustration, the tiredness, but finding rest and making space for rest in your life is very important.
Yeah. Okay. So it's time for our last segment. And the segment, as I'm calling, are synthesis questions. So these are questions that are going to be answered by every guest. And it's a series of 7 questions because that's where my mind stopped. But that I'm going to have every single person who's on this podcast answer. And if I miss someone, I will forcibly bring them back on this podcast and make them answer. So these are rapid fire. So I don't want you to think too hard about these. Just answer them as they come.
Yes.
So the first one kind of actually goes along with that question, but it's a little more specific. What is your typical executive dysfunction / rest day activity?
Nothing. Literally like sitting on the couch, watching my favorite lectures, drinking tea, doing some yoga, going outside, walking, talking to my friends, my family. Nothing.
Always a good choice. What is your favorite setting for working on your research?
Ooh, a quiet little nooky space, whether it's like my desk or the couch or outside on the patio or the library. I like a good cubicle. Not everyone likes the cubicle, but I like to be like encapsulated in a nice little working space. So it could be a nice view or it can be nothing at all.
What is one thing an advisor has told you that has stuck with you? And this could be good or bad.
A done dissertation is a good dissertation. No, but I will say my
Exactly.
advisor told me they are my number one fan. And so that
Mm,
does keep me going in terms of they see it, they get it, they're supportive of it. And you want to be accountable and responsible to the people who uplift you. So,
that's amazing. If you could choose any other area of research, what would you choose and why?
theoretical physics. Yeah,
Ooh.
I would be like a theoretical physicist or a philosopher of some sort. But definitely, once I found out that theoretical physicists exist, I was like, I could have been doing thought experiments. I could. So
I
yeah,
can pretend there's a star in the sky and then just go
yeah,
off of that.
because that's what we're doing. Like, what is an atom? Like, I never seen one, but okay.
Amazing. Who is one other academic whose research you really admire?
I would say what's coming to mind is Dr. Venus Evans Winters. She's big, really big on Black qualitative feminist inquiry, commonplaces and research. She says that we only say words like ontology and epistemology because we're trying when we have to impress other people, but we're just commonplace researchers. We've been doing this, we've always been doing this. And so I really value her work and the lane that she's carved out for people like me.
Amazing. I'll definitely be looking her up.
Yes.
Um, what is a question you've never been able to answer?
Mhm. Hmm. I'm going somewhere with like God and evil in the world, but it's like I kind of have answers, but um,
Okay.
but yeah, I guess like what? Oh, this is a question I've been at this week was what is energy? Like,
Mm,
what is it? Like, we know what energy is. Okay, energy is creates consciousness, creates matter. Okay, but what is energy? That's not something I've really been able to do because when you look at the definition, it's just like the ability to do work or something that causes something. But like, what is it? Everything is
wow.
energy, but what is energy?
Hmm. Okay, theoretical physicist.
I see.
Um, and then the last question is a silly question, but what font do you wish you could present your research in?
Oh, oh, I don't know font names, but something like big, bold, squiggly, like something cute. But I don't
Okay,
know font names, so I'm not a good one for that.
that's okay. I just
Not
know that's so.
not Comic Sans. How about that?
I know that researchers all have like fonts they don't like. Like I know we have to present in Times New Roman for the most part, and I cannot stand Times New Roman. So I'm just
Oh.
always curious what people wish they could actually present their research in.
Libri is like a cute one. I don't really like experiment with fonts too much. I'm either like Arial, Times New, whatever Microsoft Docs or whatever Google
Mm.
Docs puts up for me. I don't know. I need to find out though, so I can get my logos together, my branding.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you so much. It has been so truly wonderful and uplifting to talk to you. Thank you for being my first guest. And thank you for being willing to be on the podcast. I'm so excited for people to hear this.
Yes, thank you so much. It was really a lot of fun. So thank you for creating this space for us academics.
Of course, my pleasure. And we will talk to you all later. Bye. It truly was such an incredible honor to talk to Dr. Taylor Cummings. If you'd like to learn more, I'll make sure that links to her socials and to her work are posted on my Substack, so you can check those out. Also, if you would like to check me out online, you can find all of my socials listed on my Substack or in the episode notes. Thank you so much for being here. Please, please subscribe. Please share. Please tell your friends. This is the very first episode, and I cannot wait for everything that we have coming. So until next time, have a wonderful day.